Imagine yourself alone in a remote mountain range, the snow swirling around you like a relentless whiteout. With every step, the crunch of snow underfoot is your only companion. The biting cold seeps into your bones, and the weight of isolation presses down hard. Nobody's coming to your aid. It's just you against the elements. As the storm rages on, you face a crucial decision: fight for survival or surrender to the cold. What would you do knowing that nobody could hear you scream? This is Fatal Tragedies, with the story of the worst nightmare of every hiker. The Continental Divide Trail, a winding path along North America's spine, is more than just a physical trail. It's a pilgrimage through the stunning heart of the United States. As you journey along it, you're greeted by sweeping mountain ranges that seem to stretch endlessly into the distance, their snow-capped peaks sparkling under the sun like jewels in a grand natural tapestry. Spanning roughly 3,100 miles, this trail follows the Continental Divide of the Americas. This natural boundary separates the watersheds that drain into the Pacific Ocean from those flowing into the Atlantic into the Gulf of Mexico. Along the way, the trail weaves through a wide variety of ecosystems and landscapes, from arid deserts to towering mountains, lush forests, and the stark beauty of alpine tundra. Some brave souls take on the challenge of thru-hiking the entire trail in one continuous trek, while others opt to section hike, tackling parts of the trail over time. Whether you walk the entire length or just a portion, embarking on the Continental Divide Trail is still an invitation to marvel at nature's beauty and embrace the challenges that transform this journey into a true rite of passage. And this is where Stephen Olshansky decided to take a solo hike. Little did he know that he would never return, and this would be his last time spent alive. Born in 1956 and raised in New Rochelle, New York, Stephen Insky, better known as Otter, found his love for the outdoors early in life, exploring the woods that surrounded his home. His passion for hiking ignited when he was just 7 years old, during a summer camp in New Hampshire, where the Appalachian Trail meandered past the campgrounds. Over 7 summers, Otter conquered progressively longer sections of the iconic trail, each step deepening his bond with the wilderness. The name Otter was reportedly given to him by Native Americans during a visit to Arizona, a fitting title for someone who would glide through America's wildest trails with the ease and grace of the animal itself. Despite being bright, Otter found little interest in high school, often skipping classes to lose himself in movies or a round of golf. And yet, his true calling lay far from the classrooms, in the heart of America's longest and most challenging trails. In his early 20s, Otter completed his first thru-hike of the Appalachian Trail, setting the stage for a life spent wandering the wilderness. Summers became synonymous with hiking, while winters saw him working as a golf pro in Florida. His tent became more than just a piece of gear. It was a fixture in his life, as essential as the air that he breathed. By 2014, the Continental Divide Trail had captured his heart. Though the trail was only 70% complete at the time, Otter reveled in its unfinished state, stringing together sections using game trails and logging roads. To him, the trail was the Wild West of thru-hiking, a place where adventure still reigns supreme. Otter achieved the rare triple crown by hiking the Pacific Crest Trail, the Appalachian Trail, and the Continental Divide Trail multiple times, a feat that very few can claim. Despite the inherent dangers, which he often recounted in his blog, The Otter Diaries, Otter seemed to embrace the risks. But this time, things were a bit different than normal. In March of 2015, Otter embarked on an ambitious backpacking journey along the California coast, with plans to head east through Oregon and into Idaho. He'd heard of a proposed trail encircling the state's edge, and his curiosity was piqued. As an ultralight hiker, Otter embraced a minimalist approach to backpacking, focusing on simplicity, efficiency, and comfort. His philosophy was to reduce the weight of his gear to the bare essentials, allowing for greater mobility and a more enjoyable hiking experience. Otter's plan was to follow the southern border into Montana, but along the way, he teamed up with a group of hikers tackling a section of the Continental Divide Trail. Within a few weeks, Otter had outpaced his companions, making such a good time that he decided to continue southward and hike the entire CDT once again. It was a bold decision, especially since it was already August, a dangerously late time to start the trail, especially as he headed toward New Mexico. Fully aware of the challenge ahead, Otter prepared meticulously for the solitary stretch in New Mexico. He packed a 2-week food supply, a tent, a stove, and a land saw, and arranged for a resupply package to be sent to Ghost Ranch near Abiqua, a common strategy among thru hikers on the CDT. As he hiked through alpine Colorado in the fall of 2015, Otter faced the full brunt of autumn's descent and a winter. Snowstorms in southern Colorado's San Juan Range slowed his progress, but they couldn't stop him. By late October, as the last days of fall gave way to winter, Otter took extended breaks with friends in Manos and Pagosa Springs, Colorado, before returning to the trail. Knowing the colder weather would be a challenge, he contacted his hiking buddy, Doug Robinson, to request a tent equipped with a titanium wood stove. Doug sent the stove, and Otter tested it, camping in the snowy backyard of friends and trail angels Ben and Jill Whitting. As Otter planned his journey through the rugged Rimrock County of New Mexico, he prepared for the high elevations that defined this section of the CDT. Starting at Cumbres Pass at 10,000 feet and climbing to over 11,000 feet, the landscape presented a deceptive mix of flat terrain, heavily wooded areas, and open spaces. The terrain often rolled gently before plunging sharply over ledges, a challenge that Otter was all too familiar with. Despite the risks, he was eager to begin this final leg of his trek, especially with a commitment as a golf pro awaiting him. When Ben Whitting offered him a map for the journey, Otter declined, confident in his experiences and ready to face whatever the wild had in store for him. On November 14, 2015, Otter was dropped off at Cumbres Pass by Ben Whitting on a crisp, clear day, with temperatures hovering around 50 degrees Fahrenheit. As they parted, Whitting asked Otter to call once he reached Ghost Ranch, 75 miles south. With a heavy 2-week food supply on his back, Otter set off down the trail, but that call to Whitting would never come. As Otter departed Cumbres Pass and entered the Carson National Forest, he quickly realized he was in serious trouble. In the journal he kept during his journey, he wrote about an overwhelming sense of weakness, feeling faint every time he stood up. The flu, possibly contracted during his stay with Whitting, had taken its toll on him, leaving him vulnerable just as he was about to face one of the toughest challenges of his life. Though Otter eventually shook off the illness, he found himself in a dire situation as a powerful storm loomed on the horizon. In his journal, he vividly described the conditions. The snow was waist-deep in places. I found a small patch of ground, pitched my shelter, and the snow kept piling up, well over a foot by late Tuesday. The storm was unusual, bringing the earliest and most significant snowfall the region had seen in years. When the storm finally passed, it left behind freezing temperatures that barely reached the 20s, far too cold to melt the deep snow. Otter, determined to keep moving, attempted to hike back on Wednesday, but after barely managing to cover a single mile of the 12-mile trek, he was forced to retreat to his campsite, realizing the gravity of his situation. Snowbound, weakened from illness and without his spot emergency messaging device, Otter turned to his phone, the only connection he had left to the outside world. Using it for mapping and the occasional call when he found a signal, he also recorded a video documenting the harsh reality he was facing in the unforgiving wilderness. Stranded and all alone, Otter's fight for survival had only begun, and the wilderness had no intention of making it easy. Otter's gear was a mix of ultralight essentials carefully chosen for warmth while keeping his load as light as possible. He carried a down jacket, a fleece pullover, and long underwear, all typical choices for thru hikers. These items were sufficient as long as he kept moving at a brisk pace. For the bitterly cold nights, he had a minus 20 degree Fahrenheit sleeping bag, which would have been his lifeline. Despite the harsh conditions, Otter made the risky decision to wear running shoes, a choice that would later exacerbate his struggles. By the 6th day, November 19th, Otter's situation had worsened significantly. Frostbite had begun to set in on his toes, adding to the mounting challenges. As Thanksgiving drew near, winter had fully entrenched itself along the divide, leaving Otter stranded in his tent. A fierce storm blew in and raged for a full week, trapping him even further. During this time, Otter tried desperately to signal for help. He built makeshift snowshoes, carved a large help message into the snow, and waited, hopefully for an aerial rescue. But as the days passed with no sign of snowmobiles or planes, his hope began to wane. Otter endured this isolation for a grueling 17 days, until December 1st. Faced with the harsh reality that rescue might not come soon, he reached a crucial decision, which he described as the biggest of my life. He had three options: stay put and continue waiting for rescue, head east or west with his improvised snowshoes, though they were unlikely to hold up against the famous light powder of the divide, or venture south towards lower elevations where there might be less snow. Remembering a campground called Lagunitas just 3 miles to the south, Otter clung to the hope of finding shelter there. Fueled by determination, he packed up his tent and set out. However, the journey proved to be agonizing. He managed only 200 yards before collapsing from exhaustion in the waist-deep snow. Looking back at the spot where he'd spent the last 17 days, a haven that had kept him safe but confined, Otter took a step forward, then bent over, the cycle repeating throughout the day. On the brink of despair and contemplating sleeping in the snow, he spotted the campground bathroom at Lagunitas off to his left. Summoning what little strength he had left, Otter squeezed into the frigid, icebox-like structure. He shivered violently as he crawled into his sleeping bag, finally managing to warm up with his wood stove and a hot drink. Now Otter was stranded, with his fate resting in the hands of nature. He could only hope for warmer weather, the arrival of a snowmobiler, or an aerial rescue. Back home, Ben Whitting began to feel the first stirrings of worry, realizing that something had gone terribly wrong. Otter's fate now hung in the balance, dependent on a stroke of luck or a miracle to bring him back from the brink. By December 20th, 2015, Otter had been trapped for 27 days in the bathroom at the campground, and the hope of rescue was fading. Determined to escape, he fashioned makeshift skis from sheet metal and set off into the snowy wilderness, despite not having skied since childhood. His journey was perilous, and after a severe fall, he saw a glimmer of hope when a search plane flew overhead. He waved frantically, but the plane disappeared, leaving him to continue alone in brutal conditions. Returning to the small cement bathroom, Otter found some solace in the 6-by-6-foot structure with a vault toilet tucked in one corner. The shelter he had searched earlier not only provided materials for his improvised skis, but also revealed a hidden stash of food, several dozen pounds of horse feed. Using a stone, he cracked the oats on the cement floor and managed to cook oatmeal, anchoring himself to the hope that the plane would return. He stayed put, consumed the available food, and anxiously awaited rescue. Expressing his uncertainty, he wrote, "My gut says they didn't see me. If they don't show up, I'm doomed." Days passed without any sign of searches. Feeling powerless and contemplating giving up, Otter revisited his lifelong mantra of hike your own hike, preparing to die on his own terms. In his journal, he matter-of-factly mentioned, "My intention is to bring the stove inside later and asphyxiate myself. Probably won't work. Nothing else I tried has. I'm completely at peace with it as it's so much better than the alternative." His journal reflected a roller coaster of emotions, oscillating between moments of optimism and deep despair. At a particularly low point, he wrote, "Biggest storm yet, dumped more than a foot so far. Big winds." He journaled through the day, sounding upbeat at some points and despondent at others. "My life is over," he wrote, contemplating another desperate measure. Despite losing a considerable amount of blood, the wound eventually clotted, and Otter endured a shivering night. The following morning, he sewed up his wrist. Weeks passed in his destitution, with Otter documenting his struggles into February. No opportunity to change things. Very sad, he wrote. By his account, he still had food into February. "Going to try to keep up with the water for a few days, but I know I can't." Although snow surrounded him, he was too weak to stand, let alone venture out to gather snow. So he lay there, almost motionless as the snow continued to pile up around him. In his final days, perhaps hours, he began summing up his life in his journal, reflecting on the choices that he had made and the journey that had brought him to this isolated, icy end. On November 29th, Ben Whitting expressed concern on a Thru Hiker Facebook page, asking if anyone had heard from Otter, raising alarms among Otter's friends in the CDT community. Friends Lynn Udick and Art Rower rushed to Manos, New Mexico to search for Otter. Initially hesitant to involve search and rescue, they eventually contacted Bob Rogers, head of search and rescue for the New Mexico State Police. Rogers quickly mobilized the search, with patrolwoman Jolene Jones interviewing locals and learning that Otter had planned to hike to Ghost Ranch. A care package for Otter had arrived there in early November but remained unopened, its contents rotting. With this unsettling information, an aerial search was scheduled for December 10th. Despite challenging weather, 3 Cessnas from the Civil Air Patrol searched over 300 square miles of Carson National Forest. The search area included Laguna's campground, but the wild terrain hampered visibility. Multiple sightings were reported across New Mexico and Arizona, but none confirmed Otter's whereabouts. A man resembling Otter even drew attention at a McDonald's on New Year's Eve, but it wasn't him. Friends and authorities were growing increasingly desperate, with many fearing Otter had perished in the vast wilderness of the Continental Divide Trail. On April 7, 2016, Ian Dirtwolf Crombie, a seasoned hiker, embarked on a northbound journey along the CDT. As he approached the campground after trudging through deep snow, he noticed handmade skis crafted from roofing tin leaning near a bathroom door. The skis hinted at something ominous. Upon closer inspection, he found a note on the door. There's a dead human body inside. It is that of Stephen Olshansky, aka the Otter. Please notify the authorities immediately. Recognizing Otter from missing person flyers, Crombie hurried to alert authorities. Despite challenging conditions, a recovery team reached the campground, prying open the locked bathroom door. Inside, they discovered Otter's severely decomposed body in a blue sleeping bag, alongside a wood stove he had fashioned from tin. Personal items, including a last will and testament, were found nearby. His journal revealed his regret for consuming marijuana before his final hike and his realization that he was doomed. Otter had been stranded in treacherous snow for months, desperately awaiting rescue that never came. He succumbed to freezing temperatures and starvation, enduring a solitary death alone in the wilderness. What would you do if you found yourself stranded, fighting against the elements? Would you turn back or push forward, hoping for a miracle? Let me know in the comments section down below. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next episode.